All right. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We are the Church Safety Guys. I am James, and I am joined by Paul and Mike. Scully is joining me tonight. And in a little bit, we will actually have Simon from Worship Security Association and Kingswood Security join us. We're going to talk about training tonight. And this is actually going to be a two-part broadcast. The first part being tonight, and then the second one will be later this month. Just for some general housekeeping information for you guys. This month's broadcast is sponsored by Trinity Security Allies. And Jim and Wendy Howard oversee that nonprofit organization, and they do a fantastic job with churches and trying to spearhead training for them and whatnot. So you can visit their website at trinitysecurityallies.com. And then when you're watching this, if you would, feel free to like and share the video, and also post your name and the church that you're with. And that way we can kind of sense and get a feel algorithm wise who's watching the broadcast from where. So, and as always, as we go through the evening, this is about an hour broadcast. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to actually post them on either of the broadcast streams, and we'll do our best to get them to the speaker or answer those for you through the evening. So starting off real quick, if you haven't had the opportunity to check out our YouTube channel, we've got some great ways to connect with us. We have a new YouTube channel where all of our videos go, and we upload them there. So you're welcome to share them with your team. And if you can go ahead and click and subscribe on that. The other way to connect with us is certainly by liking the Church Safety Guys Facebook page, because as you like that, when we do broadcasts, when we share stuff, you get notifications of that as well. And then finally, the third way is really our website. So churchsafetyguys.com. You can go on there, and you can, on the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you can click register or log in. And those that do that before April 12th, we're actually doing a giveaway. We're going to draw a name out of that group, and you'll get a free copy of the Countering Mass Shooter Threat. That's a book written by Michael Martin of USCCA. It's a really, really cool book. And then also, for those of you that are watching that were kind of following this past week, we are in the middle of releasing a 31-day devotional. That is a 31-day step through strengthening the body, mind, and spirit. And we have exercise suggestions there, and we've kind of tailored it to really addressing some of the ups and downs that we deal with as safety folks. So that's coming out shortly. And for those that participated in that drawing or in that vote, we kind of had a vote on covers, and we had to change a few things with publishing and that sort of thing. But we will be sending a copy of that out to you guys. So we've got all your names down if you jumped in that poll, and we'll be kind of sorting through and kind of drawing a name out of that to send a copy to, and it will be signed by one of the authors. So sorry, I crack myself up sometimes. It's not worth anything, but we'll sign it for you. No. So anyway, we felt that there was a need. There's very little out there for devotionals from the standpoint of church safety folks and church safety ministry. So we felt that it was a good thing to bring out and work on. We've been working on it for the last couple months. The new project that we're working on is actually, we haven't come up with a name for it yet. We're still working on that, but we're going to actually write another book about church safety teams. And we're going to go through, and you might have seen the post on that. It's actually going to be just stories, basically, of good, bad, and ugly, I guess, of church safety teams and just communicating kind of a narrative of, hey, we dealt with this, and this is how we succeeded or learned, or etc. So lots of fun stuff going on. So and keep Paul and I in your prayers this month. We're going back into the studio to work on our podcast. That kind of, yeah, that's going to be fun, trying to cram an hour into 20 minutes.
Yeah, because neither one of us are exactly short-winded.
So anyhow, but thanks for joining us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and bring in Simon here. Hey, Dave, welcome to the group. Thanks for watching. Hey, Simon, how are you doing?
Good evening. I'm very well. Yourself?
Good.
Hey, Simon.
Hey, good to see you. It's the first time we've been talking.
Exactly.
So we're going to talk tonight about training and getting that started. But first, Simon, this is the second time you've been on the show with us, and certainly Paul's given me the evil eye. The first time was with Jim.
Yeah, I think at least the second time.
Maybe we've certainly talked about you, but for those new folks watching, why don't you go ahead and give us your background and history and where you're at with church safety stuff now.
Yeah, well, I'll give the cliff notes because I don't want to bore people. But obviously, you guys know I spent 14 years in law enforcement in the UK, focused on organised crime, and was lucky to be involved in liquid bomb terrorism plot against the US in 2006. I had some experience working with the British security services, MI5, MI6, that type of stuff. And then emigrated to US in 2011, where I was in charge of counterterrorism at Mall of America, which is really where my journey into security ministry began. That, I've been a lifelong Christian, and a cop friend just asked me one day. He said, "Hey, can you come and talk to my church about suspicious behaviour?" And at that time, I was running the sort of behaviour analysis unit. And I said, "Well, I can do. I don't really know too much about safety and security." And I went there one Wednesday evening, and I think the average age was 75, and most of them couldn't understand me, but the Lord told me that was where I was supposed to be. I've taken my police training and what I've learned since in security, and now I apply that just solely to house of worship. So Kingswood Security is my sort of physical security business, and the Worship Security Association is my online learning. So there's a cliff notes for anyone that doesn't know me, and you've got subtitles coming along the bottom for those that can't understand me as well. So
we're not that sophisticated yet. It'll just be question marks.
Yeah. I've gotten so used to talking to you. I don't really even, it doesn't faze me. It doesn't stop me at all.
Yeah, I guess some do and some don't. I mean, I know I've earned a lot of money public speaking just because the Midwesterners want to hear my accent, and I'm okay with that. But I guess one thing that I did leave off, which I haven't really spoken too much about, is that for most probably 8 years now, I've been working in security ministry, and I only focus on churches and non-profits. So it's really allowed me to understand the environment. This is ministry, it's security, but security ministry, and the mission always comes first. So I go to all different denominations and various different faith groups, and some of the things we'll talk about tonight, I'm sort of educated at pretty much every faith denomination, which is sort of Christian focused.
And that's one of the reasons why we partnered with you, and I just, it's a blessing to have you guys as a resource with us. So I know in the past, Paul and I kind of did a review on some of your curriculum, and it's a great opportunity for churches to have systematic training and just be kind of inundated with that and very high quality product. So for those of you that, if you haven't checked out Simon's website, you're welcome to actually look up our video on that. And Paul, you wanted to say something?
Well, I wanted to jump in there and say, if you guys have not taken the opportunity and gotten the trial for Simon's product, basically, if you've ever used like Right Now Media or any kind of a web-based curriculum where you sign into a website and you get quality content, this is something that if you're driving down the road, you can listen to it, lay it in the seat next to you and listen to it. I do a lot of podcasts that way, and I listen to a lot of videos while I'm traveling. And I've got a decade behind me in church safety. And I'm like, where was this 10 years ago? And I can tell you,
it wasn't 10 years ago.
Yeah, none of this existed. And I've experienced that with other things. And I can tell you now that if I could go back in time and give that to me 10 years ago, I could have saved myself a lot of heartache, because I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know even where the start line of the race was. And even 3 or 4 years ago, I would be searching the web for curriculum, paid or otherwise, and I couldn't find it. And so imagine a curriculum that at your own pace, you can study it. You can rewatch it whenever you want. It's a small amount of money a month. You can share it with your church. It is a tiered situation where if you have a large church, and let's say you have a team with multiple people on the team, and you want to know when they completed this so that you can check that box and graduate them to the next level. Maybe you have unarmed, armed, and you graduate people through. This is the curriculum you want. And I can tell you, I've seen a lot of curriculum. Nobody has this. And so we're going to level up as church safety with.
You're making me blush now. We should stop talking. I'm here in the room. Talk about it when I'm not here.
But this is very exciting. So anyway, I had to gush a little bit about it, but we are excited. When James said we're excited to have this product, we are. So anyway,
and here's the thing, real quick too, for the churches and Simon. When I say he's partnered with us, he's really gone above and beyond. But he has a book that's tied into his curriculum, and it's called Church Suspicious Behavior. I don't know if you can see that, but it is a fantastic resource for like a small group or for people to take notes while they're actually going through. And it's written in a small group type format setting to give you guys the opportunity, like if you have a group, to sit down and actually talk about it after the video. So very much when we say it's the style of Right Now Media, it's very much that way, where you can go through and with the study guide and ask pointed questions. So when we talk about training, really Simon is right there, and he's on the cutting edge with it. But for those of you churches that are having an issue with the cost or expense, or want to get a copy of the book, please reach out to Paul or I, because we can kind of facilitate getting you guys some of that training at low or no cost. So I always like to put that out there, that folks that watch this don't always see the back end of our partnerships and when we talk to different groups and that sort of thing. But we do spend a lot of time trying to network with different folks to try and provide training to those that ask us. So, you can approach us through Facebook Messenger or even shoot us an email through the website, and we'll do our best to try and get that content out to you. So one of the things, and Paul kind of touched on it, we were talking, the topic for tonight, we were talking about training. And, when I first started with church safety, we didn't even really call it church safety. It was, probably, 12, 15 years ago, it was more of just a group of volunteers to respond to, if someone had a medical emergency, or, if there was a suspicious car in the parking lot type thing. And so moving forward, obviously we have more of a need for it today, but, training is always kind of a hard thing to navigate, because as a ministry, as a church, oftentimes, the folks that help are volunteers. And so it's very challenging having set training and consistent training when you've got folks that have the opportunity to serve, but they're, maybe balancing 2 or 3 jobs, and, are maybe a smaller church where they're balancing a couple of different ministries. So it's always a challenge. And I was in one of the other groups today and saw some comments about individuals, or individuals had commented about how much of what's being shared with church safety today is this is how you're supposed to do it, and not, this is how we do it, but how we do it might not meet your needs. So you, as a ministry and organization, really have to spend the time to assess what's best for you. And I just for myself, I know several times through the years, I've tried to push and say, okay, we're going to train twice a month because I want my team to be, the Chuck Norris of church safety here. We're going to be high end professional, trained as much as law enforcement. And for me, throwing those requirements out, I've fallen on my face, honestly, where I've had to go back and say, look, you know what? My expectation maybe is a little too high, because this isn't a military operation or a law enforcement operation. These are folks that are serving and giving of their time to serve. And, what is a good balance between staying consistent, staying on the edge of stuff, but also, not overburdening and having issues or making issues for people. Because we all have families. We all know that, that's our priority. So a lot of times for us, it's hard to balance all of that. But Simon, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the first thing, James, I think you guys know that I have the 7 steps I sort of teach when I talk to churches. And step 1, identify your security. Yeah, and what I really mean by that is an understanding of your environment. How does your past affect security? If there's an unattended item, people are going to walk past that item, or they can challenge and sort of be inquisitive. But it really plays into what you just said about one of the things that I find, and bear in mind I've been doing this for 8 years, only focused on churches and non-profits, is that the expectation is too much on those volunteers. And I'll give you, I believe in my own church, the security, my good friend who's the security director. I volunteer at other ministries. I've got a day job. I've got 2 other jobs. If someone says to me, "Hey, Simon, Tuesday between 5 and 8, you've got to come for this training," even with my background experience, that's unrealistic. And the church I actually work with, where they had a change security director, where they implemented new standards. Within around 6-7 months, that entire safety team was a really strong rise to train over because of those expectations. So it is very challenging to get the right people with the right commitment, but you understand that these are volunteers asking. So there has to be that give and take, but at the same time, you've got to remember, we're not asking someone to be an usher, a greeter, guest services. We're asking them to be in a position to see danger, to take action, to provide medical assistance. It's a very different role. The role does require that attention to detail and the understanding of, if there's a threat, are you trained? Are you prepared to take action? But we got that person to assist. So we're really torn. So that's you seeing that in your house of worship?
You were breaking up a little. I'm sorry.
That resonate with you? Are you seeing that in your but the serious position that they hold?
Yeah, I do. I think to an extent, there have always been individuals and in churches that I've talked to that have said, we need to have individuals that are as trained and high level training, as law enforcement officers, or, just I don't know, the idea there's a lot of ideas. A lot of churches out there believe that having someone that has a big military experience or a high level of military experience or high law enforcement is always the perfect person for, the safety team. And we've kind of talked about that before. I don't, I work for the Defense Department. I work for the military. I'm a civilian employee, and I can tell you that some of the folks that I work with, I mean, I've seen people I work with, folks in the military. Not every military person is an expert marksman. Not every military person really has that mindset. And I'm not saying that to try and bag on the military or anything by any means. I'm very very supportive of veteran efforts and that sort of thing. But I think a lot of times in a church setting, I've said before, I use the acronym FAT, faithful, available, and teachable. And if I have one person that comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm willing to learn," I would much rather, grab somebody that is faithful, available, and teachable over maybe someone that has had 20 or 30 years experience, but that has a hard time being flexible or understanding that, when we do train, we're talking about folks that, don't have that as their normal occupation. We've moved forward, and we have a training program or training certification, if you will, for folks that want to carry firearms in our church and also our safety team. And what's interesting to me is we've kept the bar high, but with having that bar high, we've also given those individuals that maybe were a little bit scared of that bar the opportunity to train with them and say, look, we're going to help you get there. This isn't all about you just getting there. It's about, me coming alongside you and gradually. And what's interesting to me is that the individuals that has empowered the individuals that serve so much that, we've even gone to the extent of looking at, okay, how did you shoot last year compared to this year? And, the just the value and the excellence that's come from that is tenfold. People that had a hard time last year shooting, but wanted to carry a firearm, wanted to be involved this year are doing a phenomenal job and, out shooting some of the best. So, when I look at that, to me, that kind of comes back and tells me, look, you know what, a progression of understanding and realizing that if, I may not get to spend 2 hours with someone each month, but if I can take the best opportunity, and if that best opportunity is training once a quarter, but doing an all hands on deck quarter, and, I spend 5 or 6 hours concentrated in that one thing with refreshers, then sometimes that can be more beneficial and more effective than going to 2 or 3 hours a month or 2 or 3 times a month and burdening and stressing somebody else out because they're like, well, I can't do that because I've got these commitments and I've got this going on, but they're faithful and they're teachable. So
James, hopefully, do I sound a bit clearer now? I plugged my headset in.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. And so one of the things I would say, talking to Carl Chin Friday, and I mentioned this, that the part of the story I don't normally tell people, I went to that first church 8 years ago. It was a large mega church, and I said, full of sort of middle-aged, retired people. I had written this big presentation on suspicious behavior, sort of tactic. And I walked in the room, and like I said, I'm not a person that really talks about my background, but I've done a lot of various different things, from covert operations to terrorism. And I walked in there, and within 20 seconds, I put it down and said the presentation I'm going to present was really for someone who went into law enforcement. For those volunteers, I just spoke to them. said, here's how you need to make good decisions. And I think what I was just hearing from you, James, I would say to your listeners is, who do you want to be and who do you need to be? Because sometimes who we want to be, I follow a lot of these different groups and I'm very passive in comments, but sometimes I see that people want to be almost who I used to be, is a law enforcement officer that has a go bag in the back of my car. When my wife first emigrated to the UK, I disappeared off for 4 weeks and she hardly saw me, and I couldn't even tell her really where I was. And she just moved to the country. That guy, that was what the world was to be very successful. But who she needed me to be was a husband. So I'd understand the wants versus needs.
Mm-hmm.
I really understand we want to be that, that MI5, MI6 spy character or that Jason Bourne. But that isn't who we need to be in security. It's who we want to be. When we're talking about drawing from the holder or having to draw from being in a C position in my car, well, I can tell you I've done unarmed surveillance before where, found by people. It's not a bad place to be. And when you're there, that is a bad and lonely place. You can consider getting into that type of situation and do on someone at all, So the ones that need to be is, and I think, when we look at who do we need you to be, we need you to someone who's a disciple of God, committed to the program, and can give time and energy to get better. And the first thing, James, I say is finding someone that can make good decisions. And when I set up to my first ever presentation, I clicked about was, here's some things I can tell you about making good decisions and have good judgment. And that's what we spoke about, because quite often in safety team, that's all you really need is someone who has good judgment.
For sure. And I do think that, we spend, and we've all, the four of us have had this conversation before, but we spend a lot of time kind of talking about how the focus has been firearms and the focus has been, training and proficiency with that. And that's a great place to start. But the reality, and something that you just mentioned, Simon, about, how is their decision-making patterns, structure, etc. Realistically, 99.9% of the time, we're not going to be dealing with firearms. We're going to be dealing with maybe de-escalation, praying with someone, serving, fixing the plumbing in the church. Yeah. I've done that a few times. It's you're the team that kind of floats around. And so quite honestly, now I'm not saying that, if I went out and practiced shooting that I would be content with where my skill set is. I always want to go out. I always want to learn more. I always want to do better, because something like that is a perishable skill. It's no different than putting a tourniquet on or, doing CPR. If you don't do it consistently and be consistently refreshing, then, you're going to lose that. And, you're not going to be able to do it as efficiently and as effectively, for sure.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a good example. So, like you guys, I don't want your people to listeners to get it wrong. I'm not anti-firearms at all. My gun behind me here. I'm definitely not anti-guns. There's some other things we need to focus on. And I give examples. So just move positions, but I used to be a director of risk and compliance, so everything from risk and resiliency, continuity, financial crimes, everything risk and resiliency for me. The size of the organisation was HR and term someone. This person was refusing to leave the building, and actually I saw sat in the break room, didn't understand the significance of it. I went off to a meeting, came back about 2 hours later, and this lady still in the break room. And the HR team came running over to me and said, "We've just told this person and she's refusing to leave." It wasn't, I gave a description. I said, it wasn't this person I saw in the break room. Yeah, I said, well, what do you need me to do? You former cop, we need you to get her out the building. And I was like, well, I do that. And it comes down to the thing I say is to decide is to decide. By not wanting to take action, they were pushing it. They were in a decision. They weren't going to resolve it. So I went over, and, I was in the US in 2011. So been out of the police for 9 years, and I used the escalation that I learned as a 19-year-old in 1998 in the British Force. I went over, I introduced myself, I listened to what concern was that she didn't feel it had been explained why she'd termed. And then I followed the judo that you have over. I gave options is that, sitting here right now is not an option. You've been terminated for these said reasons. Here's 2 options, to call the police, going to call 111, and they're going to make you, you have to potentially leave and be arrested, whatever that means, or they can call you an Uber and the Uber can take you wherever you need to go. Those are your 2 options. Which would you like to do? Actually, chose the Uber rather than the car. And then she got out and then HR came back to me and they said, Simon, we were trying 2 hours to get her out of the. And I said, well, but you hadn't given the opportunity to be heard. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I hadn't listened. I started off doing I'm to risk and compliance. I understand that you're termed and you're refusing to build in to understand the situation that you're in. She explained to me. I then gave, I don't change that, you've been termed, but here's 2 options. Which option would you like to be? And like I said, I'm now 42 this year. I did that when I was 19. So verbal de-escalation and judgment training, fundamental type of people you need to train. That's going to help me see danger and take action and far crimes. But just using verbal de-escalation, what you call here in America verbal judo, is a common one. Sure. Where you get them in a.
For
if
sure.
you couldn't hear that, that's going to be a long statement, which is garbled. So hopefully you.
It is still kind of a little bit choppy from you. I'm wondering if the bandwidth is. If your bandwidth is having issues or something like that. But
I think he was trying to do like a Liverpool British accent. I think that's what he was trying to do. I think that's why it came through garbled.
Well, you've got 300 million people that are working from home right now. Xfinity can't handle it. But to long short, with de-escalation is the number thing that I recommend with decision making for sure.
Amen. I'd love to jump in there really quick.
Yeah.
Is Simon, when you made that comment about having the right heart, the person obviously needs to be saved. The person obviously needs to have that ministry heart, and then the ability to make decisions. The ability to make decisions under stress is something that some people think they can do but can't. And the ability to keep your cool under stress. I mean, we've all been in a training environment where we saw somebody just like freeze. And I've seen it several times where I remember a situation where a guy got put into a team lead position under some stress in a drill, and it wasn't a firearms drill, and literally froze, and other people had to step up and take over and run the ball, so to speak. And it's so much better to find out that we make a better follower than a leader, or it's better to find out that person can't function under stress at all than it is in the moment. I remember I dated a girl a long, long time ago that we pulled up to a wreck, and let's just say it was bad, and I went running towards it with no medical training. Well, she was a vet tech. She held animals open for surgery, so she was used to seeing blood all the time. And I thought, hot dog, I got her on my hip. We're going to go help. And I held a guy together at this wreck, and we'll just leave it at that. She got about halfway there, turned around and ran back to my SUV and basically lost her lunch because it was a human being that she saw that was injured. And that was totally different than an animal, and she couldn't handle it. And that's why training is important. That's why having an understanding of what people can do under stress and what their decision-making processes can be. Can you make the right decision, and can you make it under stress? Those are real world things. And I would much rather find out that I don't have the chops during training when somebody has a mock-up thing in front of me and it's squirting out Kool-Aid than when it matters. So that was my comment on what you said.
Yeah. I'll talk slowly and quickly to this game. In relation, the next thing that I would what do we want to be and what do we need to be, and in crisis intervention is understanding what is our position, our place. And another example, I was a 19, 20-year-old officer in England. I would go to domestic, and there was a husband and a wife in their 40s, 50s, and I would turn up as a 19, 20-year-old cop. And they didn't really want to hear from a 19 or 20-year-old what to do. But I very quickly realized, and actually this is on one of my latest videos that I shot a while ago, a crisis is a moment in time like a balloon. And what I learned very quickly was my role was to let enough air from the balloon to stop the explosion. It wasn't to understand what caused the argument, who was at fault, who was right, who was wrong, how we're going to resolve it here today. My as a police officer in crisis intervention was let enough out so no one got injured, someone get arrested. I think it comes down to the level of training, understanding what is our role here in crisis intervention, and it's to let air out to make sure that person's okay. And it echoes what Paul just said about you've got to find the heart of the ministry, because I could be talking to 4 hours trying to let air out, knowing that's all it is. If someone's and they're suicidal to commit suicide, a counsellor is just going to talk to them, not find out their life history, if they get there, what are all the effects that accumulated and wanted to life. They just want to let enough air out to make sure I'm not going to do it today. They might be having those same feelings and emotions, but today, my role in crisis intervention is to let it doesn't happen now.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can do.
I don't know.
Did we lose him?
Possibly.
Well, Mike, you were going to go ahead and say something to that.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can.
Had a quick comment related to that. Beyond just the freezing, I think sometimes under stress, I think even with our teams, we have to look at the caliber of individual that we're placing on the floor in different aspects, because sometimes beyond just the stress are they the type of person who's going to take what they interpret and instantly pass the buck? Are they going to create additional radio chatter because they're not going to know what to do? Or are they going to step up and take ownership? I think I try to find people that are going to take ownership instantly, and hopefully over time they'll acquire the skills necessary to take those things without having to create radio traffic to solve a basic problem.
Sure. I mean, you always want to empower folks, right? To be able to make decisions without necessarily having to be there to guide them. Or if there was a situation, if you're tied up in one situation and something else, another incident comes along, how can you empower them to step up and make a decision and stand behind that decision? And you're absolutely right, Mike. One of the things that I've kind of done, sometimes hit or miss, because I'm not perfect, but one of the things that a lot of times I will do is I'll ask them, I'll say, how would you handle this situation? You can go ahead and take care of that situation. Like if I'm tied up, and then after they're done, then I'll sit down with them and say, okay, how was that you handled, and how did you handle it? And they'll say, well, how would you handle it? And so it's really more of a coachable moment at that point to be able to say, okay, you know what, maybe for me as the person in charge, maybe I'm not, maybe that's not exactly how I handled it, but was it handled in the spirit of how I would have handled it? Right. So, okay, maybe it's not exactly how I would have done it, but at the same time, you you handled it and you took care of it, and there was no harm done. It was done in maybe a little bit different format or different way. So one of the things that I wanted to jump to real quick that Paul had said, your illustration with the car accident, you know, I've been in EMS and that sort of thing for a long time, so I've seen a lot of car accidents and kind of had to deal with a lot of that. And, you know, that takes me back to, I think the first one that I ever went to was a single car. A couple of teenagers had been running up and down this road. And let me see. Yeah, Simon, let's go ahead and do that. If you could, I'll pull you out and we can go ahead and try and reboot that and bring you back in. That might help some of the issues. Sorry, we're trying to troubleshoot some of his connections as well. But one of the things that I was going to say, you know, these folks were running up and down the road, and one of the kids lost control of his car, and they went off the road and hit a oak tree that was about 3 feet in diameter. And so I was actually the first call I ever went on. And of course I got there and I walked up, and I was probably 17 or 18 at the time. And right away, you know, my brain just went completely blank. Like, I'm standing there and here, you know, I've spent 6 months training for this opportunity, and I'm standing here and, you know, ambulances, rescue trucks, fire trucks, police cars in this messed up car. And everybody is like, well, looking at me like, well, do something. You're the one that's supposed to do something. So I walked up to the guy that was in charge, and I said, what do you need? What can I do for you? And he said, well, I want you to go check out that girl that's sitting over there and make sure she's okay. And so I walked over and I kind of sat down next to her and started talking to her, and she was fine. She was just a little shaken up. But they decided to put her on a backboard because, you know, back in the 90s, everything was a backboard and C-collar. You know, we got to be careful. We can't take any crazy chances or anything like that. Right. So they put her on a backboard. They loaded her in the back of the ambulance, and we're about to go off to the hospital. And she started shrieking at the top of her voice. And I was walking back towards the accident and towards the rescue truck, and one of the EMTs on the ambulance grabbed me, and he's like, she's screaming because she wants you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make sense. So I climbed up in the back of the ambulance and I said, what's going on? What's the matter? And she like grabbed my arm, like, you know, death grip right on my arm. And she's like, I want you to go with me. And so it was kind of at that point that I realized, you know, okay, so a lot of times when we deal with stuff like this, you know, there wasn't anything physically wrong with her, but we had connected from the standpoint of, you know, she was nervous about what was going on and what was happening. And, you know, and I was able to kind of calm her down. And so she's like, could you please go to the hospital with me? And so I said, you know, I asked the EMT, I said, you know, is it okay? Do you guys need some extra help in the back here? Cause they were loading 2 people up. And the driver was somebody that I knew personally. And he said, yeah, absolutely. You know, you can be an extra set of hands in the back of the truck. So I said, okay. So, you know, I ended up going, and then her family and one of the other kids' families met him at the hospital. And then, you know, I said, hey, you're here, you're at the hospital, you're good to go. But it always kind of stuck with me, because a lot of times when we think of and I've seen this over the years with the safety team as well, when we think of things like, well, I have to be doing something physically, a lot of times we don't have to be doing something physically. A lot of times it's just Exactly. It's just taking a moment to chill with the person and talk to them and listen. And that, and that's all connected with the de-escalation piece. But, if someone's interested in listening, then they're going to be more apt to figure out and assess the situation and sometimes fix the situation versus always having to physically do something. And I think a lot of times we get into the habit of thinking that, the only way we can physically do something is, or fix something is by physically jumping in and doing something. And, if you have an individual on your team or can train your team to do more assessments and be patient and quiet, sometimes those skill sets are hard to teach somebody too, and I want to look for the right person, the right opportunity to train someone to be able to, adequately handle whatever, regardless, and knowing the difference between sitting there and saying, look, okay, I need to be doing something, or maybe I need to be sitting here listening to this person right now. And I mean, I've done that before where I've taken my earpiece out and I'll say to the second in charge or whoever and say, hey, I need you to handle all calls. I'm on my cell. If you need me, I'm off, and I'll pull my earpiece out and then give someone my undivided attention for what's going on. So, but you wanted to add something, Paul?
I do, because you made a great point. You were talking about sometimes not being hands-on. I've talked before about a wreck I came up on, and I'm not an EMT or a paramedic or a police officer, but the Lord puts me around a lot of accidents. And I ran up and I saw, bless you, I saw a girl. All of us take out our hand sanitizer and we start hand sanitizing. Lysol. Oh wait, it's on the web. And so, but I ran up on the wreck and I saw a guy try to reach in, and he was a bystander. He had come up at the same time, and he actually reached in, and there was a girl with a spinal cord injury, and he was trying to pull this 11, 12-year-old girl out of a vehicle that was not on fire. There was no immediate danger to her, but it was obvious from the way she was moving and some of the sounds she was making that she was a TKO, and she was struggling with the spinal cord injury. And so I turned to the guy, I said, don't touch her. And for a split second, I made it worse, and then I had to make it better. And he kind of froze and looked at me, and I said, she has a spinal cord injury. Don't touch her. And then her mom goes, it just completely checked out. And the little girl started freaking out and shaking, because you know how your mom's voice can go right through you. And she's like, Mom's freaking out. And she was semi-conscious. And I had to turn around and I said, ma'am, I am so sorry. And I got really close to her, and I had my hands out, and I just gently touched her hand. And I said, I want to apologize. I said, I've been on both sides of this thing. I've been where you're standing, and I've been the one in the car. And I can tell you there will be a better day, and this will get better, I promise. I said, but right now that little girl needs her mom to be right there with her and to be calm and to be comforting her, because what's happening right now is only going to make it worse. And she's like, I can't calm down. And I'm like, well, you have to. Now you can freak out later, because I've had to do that. I've had to go freak out later, but right now you can't be freaking out. And she's like, okay. And she gets down there and whatever. And I take a step back, and you're looking for the calm people that can help. And as far as I'll go with the story is basically, I looked up, there's a guy coming towards me on the phone. He had this look of somebody that was ex-military, and he was really chill. He's on the phone, and he's like, we got. And I said, we've got 3 neck injuries, back seat. They're all juvenile. You're going to need at least 3 ambulances. And I said, one of them is probably severe. And he nodded and just went to talking. And then when it was over, God gave me an opportunity. I found a pair of glasses that belonged to the girl with the severe injury, and I took them to mom, and God blessed me with an opportunity to pray with mom and dad. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes not being super hands-on actually allows you to do better ministry. That's what it's all about. And sometimes it allows you to oversee things in a better place. Because if I had tried to be hands-on with everybody, I need you to sit still, I need you to do this. If I hadn't have been looking at that moment, he would have drugged her out of that vehicle, and probably she would be a quadriplegic because of it. So anyway, welcome back.
Well, yeah, does this...
Maybe.
Recite Mary Had a Little Lamb. We'll see.
Well, I guess you can't. I mean, just and back at another podcast. So how clear is that? I'm hardwired in, so
it starts off great and then it seems to deteriorate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it could just bandwidth with all the COVID-19 stuff going on, perhaps in my area.
It's actually switched from infecting humans over to computer hardware now. We're doomed.
Mike, were you going to say something?
No, just laughing at the impact of COVID-19 on computers. Keyboard to keyboard contact.
I mean, I know, and kind of what Paul's saying about having the person freak out. I mean, I've had situations where I even had team members, like ambulance team members, freak out. Where I there was one situation that I dealt with where I had to grab the guy and slap him because, and it wasn't, it was a very bad situation. A boy had shot himself actually, and it wasn't until we were getting equipment out of the truck when his aunt came over to the back of the truck and said, "This is so-and-so." And he just freaked out because he actually knew the kid. He went to school with him. And so at that point, and I didn't go to school with him. I didn't know him. He was a grade or two. I think he was a grade or two younger than I was at the time. But from the start, you hear something like, okay, there's, when you're dispatched to a gunshot or something like that, you kind of think that, okay, maybe somebody was cleaning their gun and it accidentally went off, or, that's just kind of where my brain went. But as soon as we got there and he realized, okay, wait a second, this was a guy that I hung out with and knew. I mean, I literally grabbed him and slapped him and I said, okay, I need you to snap out of this. And I need you to help, be able to focus and help me try and help him and figure out, what we're doing here. And so it's never easy. And I know, if you're doing training, if you're picking, folks to serve with you, then, realistically, you have to think through and you have to be flexible to a certain degree and understand that the individuals that are serving, it's possible that they've never been in that situation before. Amen. So, if you're not gracious and understanding, now I'm not talking about doing, somebody completely going off the reservation and doing something crazy, but few of us have seen somebody die. Few of us have had to do CPR on someone, and it's just that type of thing that a lot of times it takes a leader, it takes an individual to kind of snap them out of it, to say, look, this is what we trained for. Now I need you to do this, and I need you to help me, with this so that we can be successful. So
I wanted to throw a quick comment on there because you were talking about that. You're making great points, because I think sheepdogs are oftentimes born, but we're then battle tested, and it's kind of like tempering a blade and then sharpening it. Life takes you places. And I grew up with a handicapped sister. She was my only sibling of 5 of us that was older than me. She lived to be 14 and she had cerebral palsy. And she used to stop breathing on the regular. I saw my mom do CPR many times, my mom and my dad. And this is back in the chest compression, mouth to mouth days. I saw my parents reach back and pull her tongue forward and clear like mucus blockages. And I mean, I saw some pretty potent, powerful things. And it's just one of those things that from a young age, it tempered me. And I've only panicked a couple of times in my life, and neither one of them were life-threatening. They were just when I found out, oddly enough, both times about something with my son where I felt that panic and I was able to overcome it, but I felt that panic. And when you deal with somebody in a situation like that, I've had people fold and just be completely unusable. And then they're so apologetic later, and it's not, some people are just not hardwired for this stuff. They just aren't. And again, it's better to know outside of that environment. I mean, we dealt with a situation about a little over a year ago where I had to clean out a vehicle where there'd been a fatality at a wreck. And the fatality was one of my best friends ever. And James, you know some of the background of that. And a man walked up that I dearly love and freaked out and could not handle it. And I have nothing but respect for the man, but he could not handle it in that moment. And, there's just times that you have to like move around somebody or move them and go on. But, one of the gentlemen talked about, and I want to get this, Dave Johnson was talking about people kind of panicking during training, talking about like a simunition going off or a blank and somebody spooking and it being something that they were having trouble handling in that training. I saw a guy fold during a high pressure firearms drill. And this guy, he's known in his industry. This is a big player. And he was running a carbine and he got into a stressful moment. He flagged an instructor and another instructor stepped in and grabbed his weapon and put it back towards the target. And he started hyperventilating. And so the instructor's like, I need you to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. I need you to go over there and sit down and get yourself squared away. And so he comes over and I'm doing the chaplain thing and I'm working with loading mags and I'm guarding $14,000 worth of equipment or whatever. And as I'm standing there, I started talking to him, not knowing exactly what happened. And I was able to comfort him a little bit and say, hey, let's breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Ironically, had no idea what the other instructor had said. And then he's like, dude, he's like, I literally just pointed my weapon at a guy during a drill and he was freaking out over it. And I said, I would much rather make that mistake and fail during training with qualified people to have my back and keep me in check than to do it when it mattered. Right. And he goes, yeah. And I said, man, don't let this shake you. I said, you think that the SF guys don't ever screw up? I mean, don't let this shake you. Get your breath, get yourself calmed down. And when you're squared away, go back in there. And at first he seemed kind of skeptical. And then the more he thought about it and he got back in there and you know what, he rocked and rolled. But I would so much rather even get dressed down during training than I would during the real thing. And I think that goes over to medical because like you guys were both talking about, 99% of what we ever deal with that's serious is going to be medical. It's not going to be firearms. It's not going to be knives. And then out of all of that, back to what you were talking about, Simon, and then we can test out your mic again, is most of what we're going to deal with is actually going to be de-escalation. Listen to them, let them have their say, giving them opportunity, give them some choices, help them if we can, or tell them, hey, we've had to call the police. If you can maybe leave before they get here, it might avoid a scene. I've had to do that. So Simon, how's your mic?
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
So far, that's great.
Yeah.
I've played around a few of the back ends. This is not a representation of me or my organization. I should say, with this COVID-19. This is, but Paul, just picking up on what you said there, while you can hear me, it is true because a good friend of mine is a professor, James Denzio. I know Jim Howard admires his work. He has conducted research. His organization is called the Violence Project, and he's researched every mass killing since 1966 to 2019, I believe it was. And there's 4 commonalities that all mass shooters have. And the biggest one is that they're in crisis and they've either contemplated suicide or during their act of mass violence, they were in a suicide state. So really that crisis intervention is a key contributor. And I know I could hear you guys, but you couldn't hear me. The firearms question always comes really after, because when we look about our training, are we training in our church programs that are going to identify those people that are going to escalate to violence, which means that we're then going to have to use our firearms. So it's always about that prevention and being ahead of the game, the left of the bang rather than right of the bang. So, by getting through people that are in sort of suicidal, you're going to get to the ministry, the heart of the ministry, and you're going to prevent those mass attacks, which need you to carry firearms.
Oh, I agree with you 100%.
You heard it.
We did. We all heard you. It was great. I think Simon, you and I were talking about that the other day about, instead of being reactive with the firearms, let's change the mentality, right? And try and be proactive and understand and look for those situations where we can kind of go on the offense and maybe sit and talk to somebody or maybe pray with somebody. And, I know you've spoken and said before I believe it was the boy that was in North Carolina and did that church shooting.
Dylan Ruth.
Yes. Yeah. Dylan Ruth, that when he came in, he had said, in several interviews that if one person had stopped him or had gone up to him and talked to him, that he probably wouldn't have done that.
Oh yeah. And actually, when I talk about that case, you can still hear me, right?
Yep.
Good. When I talk about that case, I actually say that, Dylan Ruth took 9 lives that night, including the pastor and Senator Pinckney. But worse than taking 9 lives, he rubbed salt in the wounds of that faith community, that he said to them, if only someone had spoken to me, they might have been able to talk me out of it. And it's that suicidality again, which is coming into play. And so, yes, he took 9 lives, but it's the most historic Black church, perhaps in the country. And what a 21-year-old kid is saying is that no one there did the heart of the church. No one did the ministry. And we'll get into other lectures surrounding, well, why was he different than the rest of them? And it wasn't because that he was a sort of a young white kid. It was because his age. I mean, the average age of people he killed was 51. But no one said, young man, is there another ministry group that you to go to? Young man, how can we best serve you in our church? Not that you can't come here because you're white and predominantly this is a Black faith community, but no one really engaged him to find out, well, what was his need at the time. If he had done, some of his racial hatred and all those type of things that he had might have come out. So it really is. It's very true. What we do is really tied to the mission of Christ followers to look out for those people around us. And if we do that, most of the time, our training is highly effective and we prevent a lot of these mass attacks and this hurt and this pain. For whatever reason in ministry, honestly, as a consultant, 90% of what I do is about culture and environment, educating and empowering people to take action. That's really where you can spend a lot of your time in training, is when you see something, say something, because the government says, I'm going to empower you to take action, but it's not against your faith beliefs. So we're over time and I've just come in, but I'm rambling now, but hopefully that's giving you my 2-minute soundbite across the hour that I missed.
Sure. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I got a quick story. Do you want me to close in prayer at the end of this story, or Mike and James, do you guys want to throw something in as well?
I'm good. So
how about you, Mike? Okay. All right. Well, it's funny. I've never thought about these two things because you were talking about the shooting, and that was in Charlotte, if I'm not mistaken. Charlotte, North Carolina. Was that right?
Charleston.
Yeah, Charleston. And so I'd never thought about that in correlation to this until just now. But several years ago, I was pulling security for a street ministry, and it was going on in Kansas City, Missouri. And it was up near Prospect, and that's kind of a rough little area. And we were working with a ministry up there that it was a predominantly Black church, great people. And these people do God in church right. I mean, this is a church that everybody's hugging everybody, and the pastor's joking about everybody. It's National Hug a White Person Day, and they're grabbing onto the 30 of us. And we had people of every racial background and every mix of every racial background. And I looked around and I'm like, man, this is what heaven's going to be like. And, it was just an amazing event. Well, I'm pulling security, and this lady comes up to me and she says, that guy over there just gave his life to the Lord. And they were away from where I was. And she said, he comes walking up to me, and she's about like 5 foot nothing. And she goes, he pulls a gun out of his waistband, and my eyes go boing about like this. And he hands it to her, and he goes, and she's like, taking the gun from him, and she's like, holding it, freaking out. And he says to her, I want out of this gang, and I want out of Kansas City. Well, he was in an Aryan gang in Kansas City, and they were in the vicinity of Jurassic Park, the legit park in Kansas City called Jurassic Park. And so she walks over to the gutter and throws it down into the gutter. And the gun loving part of me was like, that gun could have found Jesus too. I joke, but I mean, we were joking about like, hold my ankles, I'm going in. But he gave his life to the Lord. And you want to talk about a real conversion. Here's a guy with all of the appropriate tattoos that he spent the night in the church with us. And I was pretty much up with him all night because he was on a cocktail of drugs that he was coming down from. And you want to talk about a man whose conversion was true. Here are these big buxom, 60, 70-year-old Black ladies are grabbing him up. Ooh, they're just loving on him, giving him a kiss and just loving on him. And he gave his life to the Lord. And I guarantee you a day before that, he would have at least shoved them back, right? And this was church done right. And all I can think about now, Simon, when you put it that way, is what did we avert down the road for a young man who was carrying a gun that was in an Aryan gang? And I'm not saying it would have been as bad as what happened, but that really just resonated with me. And I loved how those ladies just came up and they didn't care what he had tattooed on him. And he had it all. They loved on him anyway. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. And can I just say one more thing, actually? So, and I can get the stated case and I can give it to you guys to publish. But like I said, James Densley, when he talks for me, he gives a story of a young man that was actually going to carry out a mass shooting. And that, he was depressed, suicidal, and all these type of things. But someone actually baked cake and invited him round to their house. He actually said that simple act of kindness was his mindset. He divulged what he was going to do, and then it sort of, taught him out of it. And like I said, I'm not anti-gun. I stand in front of my gun safe for 60% of this presentation. But isn't that the best training that you have and the best situation you want to be in, where you prevent the deadly force incident before it even gets there by doing so? Never lose sight of, when you're talking about training, part of your ministry has to be the forefront, because if people are doing that within your safety team, they're capturing those people that are lost, that, as Paul says, we can either bring to faith, or if we need to talk to them, engage and help them, assist them with our programs, we can do that.
Cool.
For sure. That's a great point to wrap up.
Yeah. Well,
at
guys,
least you heard it. That's the main thing.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So you guys want me to go ahead and close in prayer? We good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds
All right.
good.
All right. Dear Heavenly Father, technical difficulties aside, we thank you for the opportunity tonight to talk about how ministry has to come first. That right heart, that right perspective. When saved individuals humbly reach out and try to love on other people, that's what church safety is about, whether it's medical or just taking care of the parking lot or making sure that the fire exits are clear, or the worst case scenario when somebody comes into the church to try to harm others. Lord God, we lift this ministry up to you. We humbly thank you for what you're doing in it, the friendships that you're building, the opportunities that are coming. Lord God, I ask that you bless everyone that hears this, guide us closer to you, help us to minister better in our families, in our churches, and in our community. And we ask this in your son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. So wrapping up real quick, just let you guys know, you can visit us anytime at churchsafetyguys.com. This month's broadcast was sponsored by Trinity Security Allies, Jim and Wendy Howard in Florida. And we appreciate you joining us. Check out Simon's website, which is worshipsecurity.org. And excuse me, for resources or training helps, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. And we'd love to help you. Oh yeah. Paul's showing his book. So hang with us. Next week is Easter. So we hope you have a blessed weekend and spend some time with your family. We are not going to be doing a live show. Lord willing, we will have a show pre-recorded that you guys haven't seen yet. I'll be joined, or I think Paul and I are going to join Chris from Forever Vigilant, and we're going to talk a little bit more about armed versus non-armed safety teams. But and you're welcome to see that. We'll have that up, and we'll be playing that throughout the day. And then we'll also probably have more information on our new 31-day devotional at that point. So thanks for joining us tonight. Take care, guys. God bless.